The air in the room where the $185 million will was read was thick with the smell of money and hatred. I sat there, an old man with a 2-year-old embezzlement conviction, facing my own daughter who was looking at me like a sworn enemy. "What the hell are you doing here?" My daughter slammed the table and stood up, not even calling Dad. "Mom just passed away, and you're already planning to take all this property? You dirty prisoner, you don't deserve a penny. Get out of my sight." Every word she said was like a knife stabbing into my heart. She had no idea that, 12 years ago, the one who had actually committed the crime was her mother, and I had accepted losing everything, going to jail instead of my wife, just to protect the brilliant future she was enjoying today. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second, what time is it for you and where are you listening? Seattle, the city of endless rain. The steady tapping of rain on the windows of my shabby basement apartment in White Center has been a familiar soundtrack for the past 12 years. It doesn't judge, it doesn't demand. It simply exists, like my invisible existence right now. I sit at my old desk, the light from my old Dell laptop screen shining on my reading glasses, highlighting the deep wrinkles on my once confident face. I am Thomas Brennan, 65. Once a powerful CFO at a financial corporation in Manhattan, now I am just an old man who does tax returns for the working poor around this neighborhood. Mrs. Sanchez sells tacos on the corner. Young Jamal drives Uber to pay for college. They pay me in crumpled cash, sometimes a hot box of lunch. I took it all gratefully, for it was the cleanest money I had touched since leaving federal prison. It was simple, honest work, and it helped me forget who I was. The phone vibrated on the plywood table. An unfamiliar number from New York. I hesitated for a second. Calls from the past never brought anything good. But then a bad feeling urged me to pick up. "Is this Thomas Brennan?" A female voice, professional but cold, answered. "This is Patricia Holbrook, the attorney representing the estate of Margaret Brennan." My hands froze on the keyboard. Margaret. The name I had tried to bury under tons of concrete of painful memories. "I hear." My voice was hoarse, foreign to me. "I regret to inform you. Margaret passed away on Tuesday morning," she continued, without emotion. "The funeral will be held at 2 p.m. tomorrow at Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. There will be a reading of the will at our office afterward. Your presence is requested." Margaret was dead. The woman I had loved more than life itself. The woman I had sacrificed my life to protect. The woman who had pushed me into this abyss was dead. There was no relief, only a vast, cold void. "I understand," I replied shortly. After I hung up, I sat motionless, listening to the rain fall harder. Memories flooded back, drowning me. I saw the trial 12 years ago, the flashing lights, the sharp accusations, and most painful of all, the eyes of my daughter, Victoria. She looked at me not with love, but with utter contempt, as if she were the monster who had destroyed her family. "You're a liar!" she screamed as I was led away in handcuffs. That scream still haunts me at night. I stood up and rummaged through my bottom drawer, where I kept the things I couldn't face but couldn't bear to throw away. An old photo, taken in Central Park on a golden autumn day. Margaret was smiling brightly, little Victoria sitting on my shoulder, holding a giant ice cream cone. My happy family, now a shattered illusion. I opened my laptop, not to work, but to look for a plane ticket. Last-minute flights from Seattle to New York were prohibitively expensive for my current income. I had to choose a cheap night flight, with 2 stops and cramped seats near the bathroom. No matter. I was used to hardship. I knew I wasn't welcome there. Victoria, now a powerful CEO, wouldn't want to see the stain of her life appear. But I had to go. I looked into the innocent eyes of my daughter in the old photo, whispering a promise to myself, or perhaps to the ghost of the past. "I'm not here for your mother, Victoria. I'm here for you. No matter how much you hate me, I have to see you one last time." Outside, the rain was still falling, cold and relentless, like the pain burning back inside me. Tomorrow I would return to New York, to the place where it all began, to face the demons of my life. New York welcomed me with a gray sky, as heavy as my heart at that moment. After a long night flight, I took the subway from JFK Airport to Brooklyn. I didn't dare waste money on a yellow taxi. a luxury for me now. Sitting on the old train car, watching the skyscrapers pass by the window, I felt like a stranger in my own hometown. This city was still the same, still flashy and cruel. Only I had changed, chewed up and spit out by it long ago. Greenwood Cemetery appeared before me, majestic and ancient with high Gothic arches. This was the resting place of the richest and most powerful people in New York, and today it welcomed Margaret. I stood huddled behind an old oak tree, a distance from the ceremony area, not daring to step closer. I saw the funeral procession enter, the shiny black Cadillacs lined up like a swarm of elegant beetles. Stepping out were people from the old world I once belonged to, bankers in perfectly tailored Italian suits, upper-class ladies with their discreet diamond jewelry. And here I was, standing in my old Seattle thrift store suit, frayed and a little too tight, feeling small and dirty. I was an ink stain on their perfect picture. And then I saw her, Victoria. There she stood, right next to her mother's casket. At 40, Victoria exuded the same cold authority as Margaret had. She wore a simple but well-tailored black dress, probably by some famous designer, her hair pulled back to reveal a sharp, emotionless face. She wasn't crying. She was running this funeral like a board meeting. My heart sank. Where was the little girl who had sat on my shoulders watching the Thanksgiving Day parade? Before me was just a strange female CEO, a woman who had learned to freeze her heart to survive in this harsh world. As the ceremony began, a strong urge rose within me. I wanted to get closer, just to place a white lily on the coffin of the woman I had devoted my life to loving and protecting. I took a deep breath, mustering up the courage to step out of my hiding place. But before I could take 10 steps, 2 large men in black suits, wearing headphones, loomed in front of me. They weren't cemetery staff. They were private security guards. "Sorry, you can't go through this area," one said, his voice cold, his hand on my chest, pushing me gently but threateningly. I'm her ex-husband," I stammered, trying to hold on to my last shred of dignity. "I just want to pay my last respects." "And we have a guest list, sir," the other replied, his eyes scrutinizing and scornful. "Your name is not on it. Miss Victoria has given special instructions. You are not welcome here." Our small commotion had attracted attention. Curious glances from the upper-class crowd began to turn toward me. A murmur of voices arose. I felt my face burning with humiliation. And then the crowd parted. Victoria stepped forward. She walked straight toward me, her high heels clicking sharply on the stone floor. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell the expensive perfume she exuded, cold and distant. Her gaze held no warmth, only disgust, like looking at a parasite crawling out of a sewer. "You dare show your face here?" Victoria hissed through gritted teeth, her voice low enough to preserve dignity but sharp enough to cut my heart. "Don't think you can profit from her death. I'll make sure you don't get a penny. Go away before I have someone kick you out of here." I thought the humiliation at the cemetery was the end of the road, but I was wrong. That afternoon, a brief text message from the law firm Ashford and Associates arrived on my cheap prepaid phone. "Request your presence at Brennan Tower, 45th floor, at 6 p.m. Required to execute the preliminary terms of the will." A foolish, fragile hope flared up in me. Maybe, just maybe, Victoria wanted to meet me in a more private setting. Maybe she needed me away from the crowd. I was wrong. Completely wrong. Brennan Tower towered over Midtown Manhattan, the place I had once sweated and cried to build with Margaret. Now, stepping into the cold marble lobby, I was stopped by security. They didn't recognize me, the CFO. I had to wait 15 minutes like a passing delivery man before being given a temporary guest badge. The 45th floor was not a quiet law office. It was a posh, post-funeral cocktail party. Major shareholders, Wall Street powerhouses, were raising their glasses of expensive scotch, whispering about the future of the company. My appearance, an old man in an old worn suit, made the atmosphere immediately tense. Victoria stood in the middle of the room, radiant and cold like an ice queen. When she saw me, she was not at all confused. She smiled, the smile of a predator that had just seen its prey trapped. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria said loudly, the clinking of glasses falling silent. She beckoned me closer. I stepped forward, bewildered like a puppet on strings. "I would like to introduce a special guest, This is Thomas Brennan, my father, and our former CFO. A few murmurs arose. Victoria continued, her voice sharp and piercing as a scalpel. And also the person who embezzled public funds 12 years ago, almost bankrupting this company. I invited him here today not out of friendship, but to remind all of us. At Brennan Corp, under my reign, dishonesty will never be tolerated, no matter who it is. I was stunned. It did not invite me to reconcile. It invited me to be a showpiece, a living target for it to shoot arrows of power at, to show its power to the shareholders. I stood there, alone amidst the contemptuous, scrutinizing gazes. The feeling was not anger, but a terrifying emptiness. 12 years in prison, exile, living like a rat. Were they not enough to pay for a crime I did not commit? My daughter. She really wanted to see me dead, both physically and mentally, to feel satisfied. I wanted to scream, to tell them all the truth, but my throat was tight. Who would believe a criminal over a billionaire CEO? Just as I was about to turn and run away from this hell, the large door opened. Attorney Patricia Holbrook walked in, clutching a thick leather briefcase. She scanned the room, stopping at me. There was something strange in her eyes. Not contempt, but pity mixed with amazement. "Sorry to interrupt," Mrs. Holbrook said, her voice loud and steely, drowning out the soft music. "But Margaret left very specific instructions about when and how her will be published. And I'm afraid some people here won't like what they're about to hear." Before the will was announced, I received a text message from Victoria's personal secretary asking me to go to the 60th floor. It was the top floor of Brennan Tower, which had been Margaret's sanctuary. Stepping out of the elevator, I felt the familiar coldness of the space. The polished black marble floor reflected the image of an old man in an outdated suit walking in the midst of the ultimate luxury. Victoria was sitting behind her mother's huge mahogany desk, her back to the glass doors overlooking Manhattan. She looked so much like Margaret that my heart clenched. The same authoritative posture, the same cold gaze devoid of any warmth. "Sit," Victoria said without looking up from her documents. There was no dad, no greeting, just a command to a subordinate. I sat down in the leather chair opposite, feeling small and overwhelmed. "What do you want to see me about?" Victoria closed the file and looked up at me. Her eyes, once as clear as the autumn sky, were now cloudy with calculation. "I want to give you one last chance, out of respect for your part in creating me. Back off. Don't show up at the will reading again." "Dad was called in by a lawyer, Victoria," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm even though I was trembling inside. She smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The lawyer was just following the procedure. What do you think Mom really left you, after all you've done?" She threw a thick file down on the table. The dry thump sounded like a gunshot. "Open it and see." I hesitated for a moment and then picked up the file. Inside were bank statements, emails, all in my name. But I had never made these transactions. These were false evidences, so elaborately fabricated that it was frightening. "Mother was too kind not to pursue you further on these charges 12 years ago." Victoria's voice was cold. "She kept them as insurance. If you dare to fight for anything, I will reopen the case. This time as CEO, I will make sure you rot in prison until you die." I looked at those papers, shocked to realize that Margaret's cruelty continued even after she was 6 feet under. She had not only destroyed me once, she had prepared a weapon for my own daughter to destroy me again if necessary. The pain did not come from the threat, but from realizing that my daughter had been completely brainwashed, turned into a tool of blind hatred. I slowly closed the file, pushing it towards Victoria. The initial fear vanished, replaced by a quiet resilience, the kind of strength that only comes when one has nothing left to lose. "I won't sign anything," I said, looking straight into her eyes. "Are you tired of living?" Victoria hissed. "I died 12 years ago, Victoria," I replied, my voice low and sad. "I've lost my honor, my career, and most painfully, I've lost you. Do you think these fake papers can still scare me? You have nothing left to take from me." Victoria was stunned for a moment. Perhaps she didn't expect the mouse she despised to dare to resist. The surprise quickly turned to mad anger. She slammed her hand on the table and stood up. "Fine. If you want to play stubborn to the end, don't blame me for being cruel." She gritted her teeth, her beautiful face contorted with anger. You just wait. Wait until Attorney Holbrook reads the will, and you'll know what it's like to be truly penniless. I'll make you regret ever stepping foot in this building today. 6 o'clock. Dusk had fallen over Manhattan, dyeing the sky red outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Brennan Tower's main conference room. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of money and intrigue. The room was packed. Not just the lawyers, but the board of directors, major shareholders, even a few strategic partners. Victoria had turned a private will reading into a public trial. She wanted everyone to witness the moment I was permanently removed from this empire. I sat in the corner of the table, secluded like a defendant awaiting sentencing. Victoria sat at the head of the presiding officer's table, the spot that had once belonged to Margaret. She looked at me, her lips curling into an undisguised, triumphant smile. She was sure she had all the cards in her hands. Lawyer Patricia Holbrook opened her alligator skin briefcase, the metal clasp clicking dryly in the dead silence. She pulled out a thick, dark blue folder. "Here we go, Mrs. Holbrook said, her voice calm but cold. She started with the minor clauses: donations to charities, the Met, the opera. The hundreds of thousands of dollars were read off as lightly as a feather. Victoria drummed her fingers on the polished mahogany tabletop, looking impatient. She didn't care about the change. She wanted the main course. "And now," Mrs. Holbrook paused, glancing at Victoria over the rim of her glasses, "to the main division of assets. This includes $185 million in cash, properties in the Hamptons and Aspen, and a 51% controlling stake in Brennan Enterprises." Without waiting for the lawyer to finish, Victoria stood up. She adjusted her designer suit jacket, ready to receive her crown. "Thank you, Patricia. I think we can skip the formalities." As the sole heir. "Sit down, Victoria." Mrs. Holbrook's voice rang out as sharp as a judge's gavel. The room fell silent. Victoria's smile froze. "I'm not finished," Mrs. Holbrook continued, ignoring Victoria's fiery look. Before she could announce the heir to this fortune, Margaret left a binding stipulation. A letter of confession must be read out to everyone present. "Confession?" Victoria hissed, her voice beginning to lose its composure. "My mother has nothing to confess. She's a saint." "That's not what she wrote, Mrs." Holbrook pulled out a cream-colored, weathered envelope. She opened it carefully. I held my breath. My heart pounded in my aching chest. Mrs. Holbrook cleared her throat and began to read. Each word, clearly, slowly, as if to etch it into everyone's mind. "To all who are listening to these lines, I, Margaret Brennan, am writing this letter in a state of complete sobriety. It is time for the truth to be revealed. Thomas Brennan did not embezzle. 12 years ago, it was I, Margaret Brennan, who embezzled that money to cover my bad investments." The whole conference room erupted. The whispers exploded like a swarm of bees. I was stunned, holding onto the chair to keep from collapsing. Victoria stood there, her face drained of color. The arrogant confidence of a few minutes ago had vanished, replaced by utter panic. "Lies!" she shouted, her voice cracking, her hand pointing straight at the old lawyer's face. "This is fake. You're making this up. He bribed you to smear my mother as soon as she lay dead." The conference room was silent, except for the calm but steely voice of attorney Patricia Holbrook. Each word of Margaret's letter struck the dead silence like a sledgehammer. Thomas Brennan did not embezzle. 12 years ago, it was I, Margaret, who embezzled that money to cover losses from bad investments. As Mrs. Holbrook read that part, the memories of 12 years ago came flooding back to me, vivid and painful as if it had happened yesterday. I remembered that stormy night in the penthouse overlooking Central Park. Margaret, the Iron Lady of Wall Street, knelt before me, tears smearing her flawless makeup. "Victoria just got a board seat," she sobbed. "If Mom gets arrested now, she will lose everything. Her career will be over before it even begins. Thomas, please, for our daughter." And I did. I had accepted that sentence, sacrificed my honor, my career, my freedom, all to protect Victoria's bright future. Back in the present, I looked at my daughter. I waited for a tear, a look of remorse, or at least a look of shock at the realization of the truth. I had hoped, foolishly, that my sacrifice would finally be understood by her. But no, Victoria did not cry. She sat there, motionless, Her beautiful face as hard as a stone statue. Her eyes, which had once held my entire world, were now colder and more calculating than any balance sheet. When the lawyer had finished speaking, Victoria stood up, not to hug me, but to give an order. "That's enough, Mrs. Holbrook." Her voice rang out, sharp and cold, cutting through the emotional atmosphere. "I demand that this letter be sealed immediately." The entire conference room was stunned. I looked at her, not believing my ears. "My mother," Victoria continued, her voice unwavering, was battling terminal cancer. She had been on high doses of morphine for months. She was clearly not in her right mind when she wrote these words. Or worse. She turned to me, her eyes filled with cruel accusation. Someone took advantage of her weakness to manipulate her, to force her to write these lies for their own gain. The murmurs began to rise. I saw the shareholders, the financial sharks, nodding. They didn't care about moral truth. They cared about the stability of the stock price. And Victoria, the powerful CEO, was that stability. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. I stood up shakily, my hands gripping the edge of the table to keep from falling. "It's the truth, Victoria." My voice was hoarse, weak but urgent. "You did everything for me. Your mother just wanted—" "The truth?" Victoria interrupted, stepping closer to me. She looked down at me, her eyes as contemptuous as if I were some piece of trash clinging to the soles of her designer shoes. "The truth is what I say, Dad. And I say that you are a con man, a greedy man trying to manipulate a dying man's will for his own gain. Don't you dare try to fool me again." I got a text message about the meeting location only an hour before. Not the office, not the house. Victoria chose a secluded corner of the bar at the Carlisle Hotel on Madison Avenue, a place known for its secrecy and $35 martinis. She didn't want anyone in the financial world to see her with me. Even meeting her own father was a brand risk she had to manage. I arrived early, huddled in my old jacket, lost in the leather walls and the soft jazz piano music. When Victoria entered, she didn't look at me. She swept past like a cold breeze, sat down opposite, and signaled the waiter not to come near. "To be brief," she began, not bothering to remove her Chanel sunglasses, though the room was dark. "I don't know what kind of witchcraft you used to make Mom write that crazy letter in her final days, but it ends here." "It's the truth, Victoria," I said, my voice hoarse. Your mother confessed. "Why don't you believe it?" She took off her glasses, her eyes fixed on me, cold and emotionless. "You think I care? The truth? In my world, the truth is what makes stocks go up, not what makes them go down. Do you know how many billions Brennan Enterprises will lose if this gets out?" I was stunned. It wasn't that she didn't believe it. It was that she didn't care. Victoria pulled a white envelope from her Hermes bag and slid it across the marble table toward me. "Here's a check for $50,000. Enough to keep you comfortable for a few years in that Seattle sewer. Take it, sign this non-disclosure agreement, and get out of my life forever. Don't ever mention the letter again." I looked at the check. $50,000. A large sum for me now, but just small change for her. She was using small change to buy my honor for life. A chill ran down my spine. I thought she had been deceived by her mother all these years. But no, sitting in front of me now was not a victim of lies. She was a willing accomplice. She would rather have her own father be tainted for life than have a small scratch appear on her queen's crown. I went to prison. 12 years. To protect this monster? I asked myself. My heart felt like it was being crushed. My little girl was dead. The thing sitting in front of me was a demon disguised as a successful businessman, nourished by lies and bottomless ambition. I held the check with trembling hands. Victoria smirked, thinking that I had surrendered, but I slowly tore it in half, then into 4. I dropped the pieces on the table, right in front of her. Victoria's smile faded. Her beautiful face was hard with anger. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, old man," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Who do you think you are to refuse me? I'll crush you. I'll make you regret not rotting in that prison." 11 giờ đêm, tôi lê bước về nhà nghỉ giá rẻ ở khu Queens. Cơn mưa vẫn rả rích, thấm đẫm chiếc áo khoác mỏng manh, cái lạnh ngấm vào tận xương tủy. Tôi đẩy cửa phòng, và một cảnh tượng kinh hoàng đập vào mắt. Căn phòng bé tẹo như một cái hộp diêm đã bị lục tung, vali quần áo bị rách nát, giấy tờ tùy thân vương vãi khắp sàn nhà ẩm mốc, trên tấm gương nứt ở bồn rửa mặt. Ai đó đã dùng son môi đỏ viết nguệch ngoạc dòng chữ Bide Andy Hoxie Chat. Victoria. Không cần đoán cũng biết là ai làm. Nó muốn tìm bản sao lá thư, và quan trọng hơn, nó muốn khủng bố tinh thần tôi. Nó muốn tôi hiểu rằng ở New York này, không có nơi nào là an toàn cho tôi nếu tôi còn dám chống lại nó. Tôi run rẩy ngồi sụp xuống mép giường, hai tay ôm đầu. Nỗi sợ hãi nguyên thủy. Thứ đã đeo bám tôi suốt 12 năm trong tù và những năm tháng lưu vong, lại trỗi dậy mạnh mẽ. Tôi muốn bỏ cuộc. Tôi muốn gom góp những gì còn lại và chạy trốn về Seattle ngay trong đêm nay. Tôi đã quá già, quá yếu để chiến đấu với một con quái vật có tiền và quyền lực vô hạn như vậy. Tôi đứng dậy, nhìn mình trong tấm gương vỡ. Một lão già bạc nhược, đôi mắt trũng sâu vì mệt mỏi và sợ hãi. Đây có phải là Thomas Brennan, người từng điều hành tài chính cho cả một đế chế không? Bất chợt, hình ảnh lá thư của Margaret hiện về trong tâm trí tôi. Những dòng chữ run rẩy nhưng dứt khoát. Thomas Brennan không hề tham ô. Bà ấy đã dùng chút sức tàn cuối cùng để trả lại sự trong sạch cho tôi. Nếu tôi bỏ chạy bây giờ, sự hy sinh của bà ấy và cả 12 năm địa ngục của tôi, tất cả sẽ trở thành vô nghĩa. Tôi sẽ mãi mãi là một kẻ hèn nhát, một tội phạm trong mắt cả thế giới, và tệ nhất là trong mắt chính con gái mình. Không, một ngọn lửa bùng lên trong tôi, thiêu đốt sự sợ hãi. Tôi siết chặt nắm tay, cảm nhận móng tay cắm vào da thịt, đau đớn, nhưng tỉnh táo. Tôi lấy chiếc điện thoại cục gạch ra, bấm số gọi cho luật sư Patricia Holbrook. Bà Patricia, tôi nói, giọng không còn run rẩy nữa, mà trầm và chắc nịch như tiếng sấm rền từ xa. Tôi đã suy nghĩ kỹ. Tôi không cần 185 triệu đô la của Margaret. Tôi cũng không cần cổ phần công ty. Nhưng tôi cần họ trả lại cái tên trong sạch cho tôi. Chúng ta sẽ chiến đấu. Đến cùng. Tôi cúp máy, nhìn lại mình trong gương lần nữa. Lão già yếu đuối ban nãy đã biến mất. Thay vào đó là ánh mắt sắc bén, lạnh lùng của một cựu CFO từng khiến cả phố Wall phải kiêng nể. Tôi vuốt ngược mái tóc bạc ra sau, chỉnh lại cổ áo sơ mi sườn rách. Còn muốn chiến tranh sao? Victoria. Tôi thì thầm với hình ảnh phản chiếu của chính mình, nhưng lời nói như gửi thẳng đến đứa con gái tàn nhẫn đang ngồi trên đỉnh cao quyền lực. Được thôi, bố đã xây dựng đế chế đó từ con số 0, và bố biết chính xác điểm yếu của nó nằm ở đâu. Bố sẽ cho con thấy thế nào là một cuộc chiến tài chính thực sự. Ngọn lửa quyết tâm đêm qua đã gặp phải một gáo nước lạnh tàn nhẫn vào sáng hôm sau. Tôi bắt đầu cuộc chiến của mình bằng cách đơn giản nhất, tìm lại những đồng minh cũ. Tôi cần ai đó xác nhận rằng Margaret đã từng có những giao dịch mờ ám vào thời điểm đó. Tôi gọi cho Jim Miller, cựu trưởng phòng kế toán, người từng cùng tôi thức trắng bao đêm để cân đối sổ sách trong cuộc khủng hoảng tài chính năm 2008. Thuê bao. Tôi nhắn tin qua LinkedIn cho Linda, thư ký cũ từng rất trung thành. 5 phút sau, tôi thấy mình bị chặn. Họ không phải người xấu, họ chỉ là những con người đang sợ hãi. Tôi hiểu điều đó. Ở cái thành phố New York đắt đỏ này, mất việc tại tập đoàn Brennan đồng nghĩa với việc mất bảo hiểm y tế, mất khả năng trả nợ thế chấp nhà. Victoria không chỉ kiểm soát tiền lương, con bé kiểm soát cả sự sinh tồn của họ. Nó đã dựng lên một bức tường lửa vô hình xung quanh tôi, cô lập tôi hoàn toàn với quá khứ của chính mình. Không bỏ cuộc, tôi bắt tàu điện đến Thư viện Công cộng New York trên đại lộ 5. Nếu không ai dám nói, tôi sẽ tìm giấy tờ. Hồ sơ vụ án năm xưa của tôi là thông tin công cộng. Tôi dành 3 giờ đồng hồ trong phòng lưu trữ, căng mắt nhìn vào máy đọc vi phím cũ kỹ. Nhưng rồi tôi bàng hoàng nhận ra, những trang quan trọng nhất, các báo cáo tài chính gốc có bút phê của Margaret mà tôi nhớ chắc chắn đã từng ở đó, nay đã thất lạc một cách bí ẩn. Không phải ngẫu nhiên. Đây là một sự xóa sổ ký ức có hệ thống, được thực hiện bởi những bàn tay quyền lực và những luật sư giá nghìn đô la một giờ. Victoria đã đi trước tôi không chỉ một bước mà là cả một thập kỷ. Tuyệt vọng và giận dữ, tôi đánh liều đi bộ đến gần tháp Brennan. Tôi không định xông vào, tôi cũng không biết mình định làm gì nữa. Có lẽ tôi chỉ muốn nhìn thẳng vào tòa nhà đó để nhắc nhở bản thân về những gì mình đã mất. Nhưng tôi chưa kịp bước chân lên bậc tam cấp đầu tiên, hai sĩ quan NYPD, cảnh sát New York, đã lừng lững xuất hiện chắn trước mặt tôi. Ông Thomas Brennan, viên cảnh sát trẻ tuổi hỏi, tay đặt hở lên bao súng. Chúng tôi có lệnh tòa án dành cho ông. Anh ta dúi vào tay tôi một tờ giấy. Lệnh cấm tiếp xúc tạm thời, Temporary Restraining Order. Victoria đã khai man với tòa án rằng tôi đang quấy rối, đe dọa sự an toàn của nó và nhân viên công ty. Ông phải tránh xa cô Victoria Brennan và tòa nhà này ít nhất 100 mét, viên cảnh sát nói, giọng lạnh lùng như kim loại. Nếu vi phạm, ông sẽ bị bắt giam ngay lập tức. Hiểu chứ? Tôi đứng chết lặng giữa dòng người hối hả trên vỉa hè Manhattan, tay cầm tờ lệnh tòa run rẩy. Tôi, người đã đặt những viên gạch đầu tiên cho đế chế này, giờ đây bị coi như một tên tội phạm nguy hiểm ngay trước cửa nhà mình. Đúng lúc đó, điện thoại tôi rung lên. Là luật sư Patricia Holbrook. Thomas, nghe tôi nói này. Giọng bà ấy gấp gáp, tiếng giấy tờ sột soạt ở đầu dây bên kia. Tình hình rất tệ. Đội ngũ pháp lý của Victoria đang vận động ráo riết để tòa án tuyên bố lá thư thú tội của Margaret là vô hiệu do tình trạng tinh thần không ổn định. Với thế lực của con bé hiện tại, thẩm phán có thể sẽ gật đầu. Nhưng đó là sự thật. Tôi gầm lên trong bất lực. Sự thật cần bằng chứng sống. Thomas, bà Holbrook hạ giọng, nghiêm trọng. Lá thư của người chết là không đủ trước một tập đoàn luật sư sống. Chúng ta cần một nhân chứng. Một ai đó còn sống và biết rõ mọi chuyện năm xưa. Nếu không, chúng ta thua chắc. I sat in a seedy 24-hour diner on the edge of Queens, staring into my cold black coffee. The no-contact order lay crumpled on the table like a death sentence for all my efforts. I had reached a dead end. Victoria didn't just have money, it had a legal system protecting it. I was just an old man trying to beat my head against a stone wall. Just as I was about to stand up and admit defeat, my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated, but picked up. Don't hang up, Mr. Brennan, a woman's voice said, shaky and urgent, over the loud honking of a car horn on the other end. Please, I know you're not embezzling. I know because I was the one who made those transfers at Margaret's direct direction 12 years ago. My heart skipped a beat. This voice. Sarah? Sarah Jenkins? Shh! Don't say my name on the phone, she hissed fearfully. They might be listening. If you want to know the truth, go to the parking lot behind the old Walmart in New Jersey. 1 o'clock this morning. Go alone and make sure no one is following you. 1 o'clock. I drove the beat-up rental car to the meeting place. It was an empty lot with cracked asphalt, lit only by a few yellow streetlights. An old Ford was parked in a dark corner. I walked closer. The window rolled down a little. I almost didn't recognize Sarah. The woman who had been Margaret's right-hand woman, always neat in her business suits, now looked old and haggard, her eyes sunken with worry. Mr. Thomas, Sarah said, her voice breaking when she saw me. I'm sorry I kept quiet all these years. She destroyed me after you went to prison. She fired me, threatened to slander me if I ever spoke. I had to live in hiding, doing menial jobs just to survive. Why are you calling me now? I asked, feeling a pang of sympathy. We were both victims of the same person. Sarah looked around warily and then pressed a small piece of paper into my hand. Because I saw what Victoria was doing to you. It was as cruel as her mother. And I know the letter wasn't the only thing Margaret left behind. I frowned. What do you mean? Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes flashing with determination and fear. Margaret didn't trust anyone, not even her own daughter. She was afraid Victoria would one day oust her, so she kept insurance. It wasn't just a confession letter, Mr. Thomas. She also had a tape. In it, she explained everything in detail, including how Victoria knew the truth all along but was complicit in hiding it. My hands shook as I held the piece of paper. A tape. It was the living proof that Attorney Holbrook needed. Where is it? I asked urgently. It's in a safe deposit box at the old bank in the Bronx, Sarah whispered, her eyes darting around the darkness. Only Margaret and I know of its existence. I have half the code. She keeps the other half in her personal diary. The diary I secretly kept before I was fired. Tomorrow, as soon as the bank opens, we can go there and get it. It will be the end of all this. 9 o'clock in the morning. I stood huddled in front of the old bank branch in the Bronx, waiting for Sarah. The rain was pouring down. The wind was blowing cold gusts against my body, but the flame of hope still burned inside me. That tape! It was the key to unlocking this hellish door and stepping into the light. I looked at my watch. 9:15. Sarah still hadn't arrived. I called the number she'd used last night. The subscriber you've dialed is currently unavailable. A feeling of unease washed over me, colder than the rain outside. Sarah wasn't one to break a promise, especially when she was so determined. Unable to wait any longer, I took a taxi to Sarah's home address, which I vaguely remembered from my old personnel file. It was a rundown apartment complex on the edge of the city, where the working poor were trying to hold on to New York. When I arrived, I saw a moving truck parked in front of the door. Workers were carrying furniture from the first-floor apartment to the car. I ran, my heart pounding. The apartment door was ajar. Inside, Sarah was sitting on a cardboard box, her face streaked with tears. "Sarah!" I called. She looked up, startled. When she saw me, fear was evident in her swollen eyes. She quickly stood up, intending to close the door. "Sarah, what happened?" "The tape." "Go away, Mr. Thomas." Sarah sobbed, her voice cracking with panic. "Please go away. I can't help you anymore." "Why?" "You said last night." "Last night they came here," Sarah interrupted, trembling. "Victoria's lawyers. They know everything. They said if I said a word, they would cut off my pension. They'd sue me for violating the non-disclosure agreement I signed when I was fired." She paused, swallowing back tears. "And worse, they know about my son. He got into a little trouble with the law last year. Victoria threatened to turn over the record and have him jailed if I didn't shut up and leave this city immediately." I was stunned. Victoria wasn't just quick. She was even more ruthless than her mother. She knew exactly what a person's weak spot was, and wouldn't hesitate to use it to suffocate them. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas. I want to help you, but I can't sacrifice my son," Sarah said, pushing the door open. Slam! The door slammed shut in my face, like the end of all hope. I stood alone in the damp hallway, listening to Sarah's sobs from inside. I had lost my only witness. I had lost my only evidence. I staggered out into the street, feeling the world collapse beneath my feet. From across the street, a shiny black Maybach was parked quietly in the rain. The rear window slowly rolled down a bit, just enough to reveal a pair of cold eyes and a haughty half-smile. Victoria. She had been there all this time, witnessing everything. She wanted me to see her, wanted me to know that she was always one step ahead of me, that in this city her money could buy anyone's silence. She looked at me for a second, then the window slowly rolled up, hiding her triumphant face. The car drove away, leaving me alone in the cold rain and despair. 2 a.m. I stood in front of Victoria's $50 million penthouse on Park Avenue. The rain was cold against my face, but not as cold as the despair that froze in my heart. I had lost everything: witnesses, evidence, and even legal hope. This was a last-ditch effort, a foolish struggle of kinship. I wanted to look into my daughter's eyes one last time, to see if there was anything left of the child I once held in my arms. She let me in, not out of love, but because she was drunk on victory and needed an audience to admire her greatness. Victoria sat on a cream leather sofa, a glass of Romanée Conti that cost more than a single drop of my rent. She looked at me, her eyes dull with alcohol but razor sharp. "Are you here to ask for money?" she asked. Her voice slurred. "Wasn't 50,000 enough? Now it's gone down, old man." "You didn't come for the money," I said hoarsely. "You just want to know, why? Why do I hate you so much? You sacrificed 12 years of your life to protect my future." Victoria laughed. The high-pitched laughter echoed in the large room. She stood up and staggered toward me, the smell of expensive wine wafting in my face. "Sacrifice? Oh, how noble," she smirked, jabbing her manicured index finger into my chest. "Why do you think Mom left the company to you in her will? Out of remorse? No. She did it because she knew I was even more ruthless than she was." I froze. "What do you mean? Do you think I'm stupid?" Victoria whispered into my ear like a venomous snake. 12 years ago, when I first joined the board, I saw those documents. I knew Mom was the one who embezzled that money. I knew Dad was innocent from the first day he went to prison. The world seemed to fall from my feet. My breath caught. "But what did I do?" she continued, her voice cold and terrifying. I chose to stay silent. Because if Mom had fallen then, I would have lost everything. I let Dad rot in prison to keep my job. And you know what? I would do it again now, without hesitation. I stepped back, looking at the creature before me. This was not my daughter. This was a monster created by money and ambition. She was not deceived. She was an accomplice. Worse, she was a beneficiary of her father's blood. Victoria turned her back, draining her glass. You're a good man, Dad. That's why you're always a loser in this world. Now get out of here before I call security. I walked out of the building into the cold New York night, the rain mixed with salty tears on my lips. I looked up at the top floor window, where the yellow lights were still on. I don't have a daughter anymore, I muttered, my voice lost in the din of the city's honking horns. She died 12 years ago. With no witnesses, no physical evidence, I was left with my own story. In my utter desperation, I contacted Mark, a young freelance journalist in Brooklyn, the only one who didn't hang up on me. The next morning, we stood in front of Brennan Tower. Mark had only an old camera to live stream. I stood there, my back to the building I had built, took a deep breath of the smoky New York air, and began to speak. I told him all about the letter, about Victoria's treachery, about the 12 years of injustice. But I was too naive. I forgot that Victoria not only owned the tower, but also the cameras pointed at it. Just 5 minutes later, a series of cars from major TV stations arrived. I thought they were here for the truth, but they pounced on me like vultures on a dead body. Mr. Brennan, are you so desperate that you have to blackmail your daughter? Did you spend all the money you embezzled 12 years ago? They didn't ask about Margaret's letter. They just attacked my criminal past. Mark tried to intervene, but was thrown out. At that moment, Brennan's legal team appeared, announcing to the cameras, "Mr. Thomas is mentally unstable and delusional. We have requested police intervention to protect him." Oh. Two NYPD officers immediately closed in, inviting me to leave before I could protest. The image of me sandwiched between the two officers, my hair disheveled, my face red with anger, was broadcast live across the country. I didn't look like a victim seeking justice, but exactly like what they wanted, a crazy old money-grubbing man. That night, in the shabby motel room, I saw Victoria on the primetime news. She sat in her posh office, dabbing a perfect tear at the corner of her eye. "It hurts to see my father blinded by money," he said, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "We are forced to take strong legal measures, not to punish him, but to protect him from himself. It's not just killing my reputation. It's preparing to bury me alive under the label of mental illness in the name of love." 3 days later, I was brought to the Manhattan Probate Court. But this was not a place of justice. It was a carefully choreographed stage, and I was the aging puppet whose strings were being pulled. Victoria struck back. She filed an emergency motion to remove attorney Patricia Holbrook for conflict of interest, since she was managing Margaret's estate. Judge Davies, a man with bleary eyes, promptly granted it. I was left alone with a young public defender who hadn't even finished reading my name on the file. Sitting across from her, Victoria looked painfully perfect in a modest black dress, occasionally dabbing at non-existent tears. Beside her sat Dr. Vance, a televised psychologist I'd never met. "Your Honor," Dr. Vance stood up, his voice a false professional, pointing at the screen that showed me being subdued by the police the day before. "Mr." Brennan's behavior is typical of acute delusional disorder. The patient has turned the pain of loss into irrational hostility toward his daughter. We call this a persecutor complex. He no longer has the capacity to make his own decisions. Every word he said was like poison injected into my brain. He was turning my bloody truth into a symptom of a disease. "You're lying!" I couldn't help but jump up and bang on the table. "I've never met you. How dare you diagnose me from a video? This is a play." "Quiet." The judge banged his gavel loudly. "Mr. Brennan, sit down now. You have to listen to me. She's lying to steal everything." Two large guards immediately closed in, pressing me down into the chair. The physical pain was nothing compared to this humiliation. I saw a smile flash across Victoria's lips very quickly. She knew she had won. My righteous anger was the perfect proof of my so-called illness. Judge Davies shook his head in pity. "Based on the overwhelming evidence, the court finds that Mr. Thomas Brennan is in a dangerous situation. I hereby declare him temporarily suspended and grant him emergency guardianship of Victoria Brennan." The gavel fell cold and decisively, like the closing of a coffin for my freedom. "Order for Mr. Brennan to undergo a mandatory psychiatric evaluation. The hearing is adjourned." As I was being dragged away, I looked back one last time. Victoria had stood up and was shaking the judge's hand. She turned to me, no longer feigning pain, but a cold, satisfied look. She had just robbed me of my human dignity right before the eyes of the law. The four walls were white, the strong smell of antiseptic mixed with the smell of despair. I was in hell, but there was no fire, only the cold, chilly atmosphere of a heavily guarded private psychiatric hospital in suburban New York. They had stripped me of my clothes, replacing them with lifeless, pale blue hospital gowns. They had taken away my voice. Every time I tried to explain that I was sane, the doctors, who were paid with my daughter's money, would write in my medical records, "Patient continues to deny reality, tends to be agitated." I sat on the cold iron bed, hugging my knees, looking out the barred window. All my life I had lived honestly, loved with all my heart. I had gone to prison for my wife, lived 12 years in the dark to protect my family. And this was the end? An old man branded insane, buried in a bottomless pit dug by his own child. And then it came. Victoria didn't enter the room. She stood outside the thick tempered glass, looking at me like one would a dangerous animal in a zoo. She wore a bright red dress, a stark contrast to my white world. She smiled, leaned close to the communication window, her voice coming through the speaker, crackling but still clear enough to make each word. "See, Dad? This is a place for the unreasonable," she whispered, her eyes flashing with a satisfied cruelty. "You'll die of old age here, Thomas, and the world will only remember you as a greedy old man who tried to bite back the hand that raised him. I won." Oh. She turned on her heel and walked away, the sound of her high heels pounding down the hallway fading like a hammer, hammering nails into my coffin. I closed my eyes, a hot, helpless tear rolling down my cheek. I had truly lost to the demons that Margaret and I had created. Perhaps dying now would be a relief. That night I lay motionless, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how to end my life. Just then, a night nurse came into the room to check. She looked around warily, making sure the security cameras were facing the other direction. Quickly, she took my hand and stuffed a small, cold object into my palm. "Don't let anyone see," she whispered, then hurried away. My heart was pounding. I opened my hand slightly under the thin blanket. It was a small, crumpled piece of paper. I shook it and smoothed it out, reading the hastily written words under the dim light of the nightlight. It was in the handwriting of Attorney Holbrook. "Margaret is not stupid. Don't give up. Wait until exactly 12 noon tomorrow." It was exactly noon. I was still sitting in the patient room, but my eyes were glued to the small TV on the wall. The news channel was broadcasting Victoria's press conference live. It stood there, bright and powerful, in front of hundreds of cameras, announcing the new era of Brennan Enterprises. Suddenly, the large screen behind Victoria flickered, and the image changed abruptly. It was no longer the company logo. It was Margaret's haggard face on the hospital bed. The whole room gasped in surprise. Victoria turned around, her face pale. "If you're watching this video," Margaret's voice rang out, weak but clear, "it means my daughter Victoria has betrayed her father once again. This is the truth." It was the dead man's switch that lawyer Holbrook had mentioned. If the will was not executed on time, this video would automatically be sent to the FBI and all the major media outlets. On the screen, Margaret held up the original files. She confessed everything, not just her own guilt, but Victoria's complicity. The emails, the secret deals, everything was laid bare for the world to see. "Victoria knew the truth 12 years ago," Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. "She chose her career over her father. I'm sorry, Thomas. This is the only way I can protect you when I'm gone." I saw the police storm into the hall live on television, the dry click of handcuffs locking onto Victoria's wrists. She struggled, screamed, but no one listened. Her empire of lies had collapsed in an instant. An hour later, the door to my hospital room swung open. Not a guard, but Mr. Holbrook, followed by the New York Police Department with orders for her immediate release. I stepped out of the white building and took a deep breath of the polluted, free air of New York. I didn't take over the company to become a billionaire. I used the entire $185 million to found the Brennan Freedom Fund, which provides legal aid to people like me who were wrongly convicted. In the final scene, I stood before Margaret's grave. A simple bouquet of white lilies rested on the cold stone. No more hatred, just a deep peace. It took me 12 years to carry a sin that wasn't mine, and another month of hell to learn that. Blood doesn't make family, integrity does, I whispered. my voice blending with the rustling wind of the cemetery. I can't get back the lost years, but I got back who I am, and this time no one, no force can take it away.